Thank you all, first of all, for joining today's webinar. This is going to be around optimizing your Laserfiche folder structure. My name is Stephen Krutzfeldt. I am a pre-sales engineer here with CDI. If at any point you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and post them in the questions chat box, a little floating window on your GoToMeeting floaty window area. And then we'll have some time at the end of the webinar to go through and answer those questions. Today's topic is going to be around optimizing your folder structure. And I've decided that the intended audience for this webinar is all Laserfiche users, but I'd like to even include anyone who's new to Laserfiche and might just be considering possibly moving to Laserfiche as an enterprise content management system. This will give you a little bit of idea of the folder structure setup and how it's designed to optimize the organization and make it easy to navigate to your different documents. And we'll also pepper in a little bit of information around security and how not only are those documents easily accessible to anyone who needs to get to them, but it's also locked down for those who shouldn't be viewing them. An agenda here, we're going to start by looking at a couple of examples of folder structures. We'll then go through some online resources where you can visit and get a little bit better idea and get some of your questions answered. And then we'll go through some tips, tricks, and best practice. So I wanted to start out by taking a look at a couple of folder examples. Those of you who have frequented my webinars know that I'm not a huge fan of long PowerPoints, so I am going to try and keep this relatively brief, but it's still a good medium for showing you multiple examples of things like this. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through sort of what we're looking at here. Many of the examples we have are around townships, cities, municipalities, counties, and government, because that's the bulk of our clients. But we will get into some other basic business folder structures and go through from a high level what the organization thought process is. So you'll notice here that on the left and on the right, I guess, both of them are primarily focusing on specific types of documents. So that's one of the first schools of thoughts, is by making sure that we're grouping all of our documents into one, what we would call root folder. Or in this case, administration would be the root folder, and then we have subfolders underneath it. But one theme that you should see throughout the duration of this presentation is that we're looking to organize the documents the same way that you sort of organize and structure your organization or your company. And we want to make sure that like documents are being stored together, so you're not forcing people to visit several different locations to try and find similar types of documents. It might make sense initially to save documents maybe in individual's folder so that John Smith has all of his documents in one location. However, we don't necessarily want John Smith to have things like invoices and then have HR files and then also minutes or resolutions that he worked on all in one location. We need them to be in a type of location that people will know they can consistently navigate to find those. So that's more or less what we've seen here. You'll also see, if we go a couple of structures down, one of my favorite things to do is break things out into year folders as well. That there's a workflow trick that can automatically file your documents based on what type they are, and it can also file them into a subfolder based on what year they were created. That serves a couple of different purposes. The main one being that if you've ever tried to open up a Laserfiche folder where there are thousands of documents, it's very hard to find what you're looking for. Also, it usually takes a long time to load, and so that eats into those prime hours of productivity in your organization. So we like to break things up when we can, and year folders are a great way to do that. I've also seen folks use alphabetizing as well, that A through C would be in one folder, D through F in another folder, depending on what the types of documents are. But back to this example here, we're mainly looking at city and township examples here. The right looks a little bit different, and that's because they're using records management. If you're not familiar with records management, there are a couple of video examples out there that I've done. The main thing that you need to know, kind of the 30-second elevator pitch, would be that records management allows you to utilize add different records attributes, things like disposition types, retention schedules, How long do you need to maintain or retain a document before it can be either destroyed or does it need to be ascended to another location? That's what records management is really designed to do and facilitate. So here we see things like, yeah, sorry, we'll go back there. Just meeting records. So all of your meeting records could be in one location, whereas Notary Public Logbook would be in another location. But ultimately, the high level takeaway here is that we're keeping like documents in one location. Let's look at a couple other examples. City Clerk is a very common root folder that you'll see with our cities and municipalities. City Clerk typically has to deal with a lot of different documents, a lot of different types of documents. What we've also seen, though, is that they're pretty similar from one municipality to another. So things like the meeting minutes, ordinances, resolutions, proclamations, election type of documents, policies and procedures. So oftentimes what we do is we come forward when we have a new client and say, how does this look? Is this something that you could use in your organization? And for the most part, they end up adopting that as sort of the beginning and the starting folders. And then as they get comfortable using that folder structure, they'll start to build out and maybe break off and create some subfolders after that. But we find that this is a very common starting folder structure for cities and townships. One on the right is another similar one where you have different branches or different parts of your organization. So from a root level folder structure, as you can see, we would have things like building, city code, council, fire, police, etc. And then, of course, as you go deeper, the different file types would be broken down into, delineated more into separate types of documents. Here's another similar example. Notice we have the records on the right. Oftentimes you do have specific records, compliance regulations around court records, so that's why they would be in a records management system. On the left, we see our basic folder structure for things like permits, planning and zoning. For those of you who don't know that records management would necessarily be a requirement, but you would still like to maybe keep track of how long you would like to keep certain documents, there is the ability to use metadata and templates to set up alerts and things. So saying that this needs to be retained for at least 3 years and maybe send out a notification after it's exceeded 3 years. You don't necessarily need to make the purchase of records management in order to track things like that and set up that type of workflow. If you'd like to learn more about that, I'd be more than happy to discuss how we've done that for others in the past. Pretty much more the same here, more examples of cities and townships. Note also that all of this will be recorded. So if it seems like I start to go a little bit fast, know that this will be available on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and pause and write down and take ideas away. Hopefully it'll be useful in the future as well. Here we have another couple of examples of things like agenda packets, budgets, but we also added easements, finance reports, improvement projects, some of those other areas that would be heavy on documents, making sure that we are separating them out. This one on the right is actually an example of CDI's internal, like what we actually use for our Laserfiche system. So we have our client files, and then the subfolders would be the names of our clients. We have company procedures that usually broken down by department, so that way we know what the policies, procedures, and those steps are for different internal processes. So we have that documented and then also easy for our users to find. Then we have a couple of different departmental folders here for like consulting, our development department, marketing. So marketing would have all the different marketing type of documents, files, videos, and so forth. And then sales, support, and then also just like testing. And then as you know, CDI, or as I hope you know, CDI, when there isn't a pandemic going on, likes to participate in user groups, hosting them and collaborating with some of our different clients. So that way we have a nice group of where we can get everyone together who's been using Laserfiche and having CDI help them out and start to share ideas and what's been working. Property files is another common one. So breaking things down by street name. It's just an easy way to keep things organized. Also, being able to sort and filter is a big value add as well. Logs, compliance, this is just another example of what we've done in the past. All right, so I didn't want to spend too much time just looking at examples. I want to kind of get into talk about a couple of the different resources where you can find additional information, knowing that if you're researching what a root folder structure may look like, chances are you're still a little bit early on in your Laserfiche journey, I guess, and hoping to find out what works, what other people are doing, and that's what some of these other resources are designed to do. So the first one is support.laserfiche.com. We'll just go ahead and pop that open and take a look. So this is our support site, and it has a quick link to a couple of additional resources, some of those being Laserfiche Answers. What we need to know about Laserfiche Answers is that it's an online forum type of community where you can post your questions Laserfiche related, and then other community members will come back with an answer. I've noticed in the almost 2 years that I've been working with CDI and working with Laserfiche that any question that I've had, someone else has probably had it in the past. So 98% of the time, I don't even need to post the question. I just search it on Laserfiche Answers, and I'm usually able to find out how this has been resolved in the past. Also, quick links to Laserfiche product help, different configurations, support lifecycle, and then also information about the different releases. If you are looking for more information around training, there's also some learning resources here on the support site. User groups are still happening from time to time, although they are primarily going to be remote, of course. We have a couple different video tutorials, as well as the Solution Exchange, which I'll go ahead and pop that open too. Solution Exchange is just another area where there's a lot of different articles, videos, information about events, solutions. It's a good one to just sort of go through and browse and see how different groups are using the system, what's working, best practices, and things like that. It's a good way to, I guess, and then product announcements. All right. Another one that I'm a big fan of, because I'm often featured, is our YouTube site. This is one that I would recommend that you find and maybe bookmark, maybe subscribe to. This has all of the different videos that we do around our demos of our new products, as well as the trainings that I do. This is a great way to go and familiarize yourself with a visual aspect, a visual component of things like how to set up security, how to design workflows, introductions to forms and things like that. That we have dozens, at least dozens of different videos out there, and everything from how-to best practice to exciting new things that CDI is working on developing and deploying soon. Also, this is where the video that we are, or the this recording of this this meeting is going to go. And then also, lastly, is going to be the CDI support site. And by support site, I mean the CDI website. We have a lot of information. We spend a lot of time on our content, making sure that if you have any questions, we're able to get to those. If you want to know who to reach out to regarding a question or a new process or any issues you may be having, all of that's going to be here. We have a couple different blogs. We have a list of the different services that we support. Information about us. I guess I would recommend that everyone, if you haven't been to the CDI website, go ahead and check it out. Just poke around. You may not find anything that you necessarily need today, but know that later on, as questions come up and you get more familiar and more comfortable with Laserfiche, you may want to broaden those horizons. The CDI website is a great place to start. All right. Next thing I wanted to get into was, let's go ahead and look at a couple of examples. And you know what? I got kicked off earlier, which is why we had a slow start, so I might have to reconnect my VPN. I also normally work with 2 screens, but I'm working from just one right now, so I apologize. Those of you who are watching the recording will probably be at an advantage because this will get cut. All right, so this is my virtual machine, kind of my just demo practice machine. I've got a couple of different repositories set up and a couple of different repositories based on different business types. So the one we're looking at right now is going to be just sort of a generic business folder structure setup. Now, the first thing you'll notice, and you may have noticed this on some of the other examples we showed, was the incoming scans location. Most of the time when CDI, and I assume other VARs, help to set up folder structures, the first folder we're going to create is going to be an incoming scans folder. And that's in order to facilitate different autofile workflows. So we like to have a centralized location when possible for all scans to come in where workflow can be monitoring it. So I think we have this one set up so that if a new document were to be scanned in here, if it has a specific template associated with it, so maybe we'll do HR documents, and we'll say confidential. We'll fill in some information for Creed Bratton, hit OK. We should see that new document disappear and be automatically filed. And if not, then it's because it's the wrong type. But normally what that would do is automatically be grabbed by the workflow, moved to, in this case, it would be an HR type of document, into the correct employee file, into that location. So we like to see incoming scans as a common folder at the root across all of our different organizations. If you are scanning documents into different departments and you want each department to have its own incoming scans, that's something else that we see as well. Another big one is you'll notice that we have a lot of different root folders here for your different departments. So client facing, a common one would be to have your clients at the top and then the name of the clients as the subfolders. And then each client could have its own subfolders for different types of documents, depending on what it is you're looking to retain. But that would be a little bit more up to what kind of documents are you keeping. So in this case, we have the example of invoices, and we have the example of letters, but that could be any number of types of documents. Finance also, this is a relatively common starting point for the finance root folder, having things like accounts payable, accounts receivable, budgets, financial statements, payroll. Depending on how you want to have that started out, this would be kind of all-encompassing. Then, of course, you could break that down further. So, for example, accounts payable could include things like credit notes, invoices, packing slips, paid invoices, et cetera, kind of depending on how you want to do that. One thing I will also say is that for setting up a folder structure, at the end of the day, the thing that's going to work the best and the structure that's going to work the best is what makes the most sense for your own organization. I've dealt with probably a couple hundred of different clients, and I've never seen the exact same folder structure twice. It's always different. It just depends on a lot on what your business is structured like, and then how you want to sort those different things, and what are the most critical documents, and how is it going to be easiest to file those and then find those as well. Human resources is a common one. We would have things like current employees, past employees, maybe have your job requisitions. Departmental files could be another one, so like just basic HR documents. Oftentimes when I do my demos, I'll use HR as an example, though, showing that we can have different employee files. Another key part of this is going to be metadata as well. But basic information about, is this an active employee? What is their name? What department do they work in? We always recommend using metadata whenever possible. That's going to help facilitate searches. If you want to learn more about that, I'm not going to go into too many details today, but we do have an entire video on our YouTube channel around how to apply metadata, some examples of templates, some examples of fields, and best practices. So marketing, videos, images, and then looks like that just got tucked in there by accident. And another example would be things like sales. Also have records in here as well. Since we talked about records a little bit, let's go ahead and pop this open. I'll show you the record properties. This is what I was talking about when I said that records are a little bit different from regular Laserfiche folders. We're going to have information about when it's cut off, meaning when can we set it so no additional changes can be made to it, no additional documents can be saved to it, things like that. And we have the retention schedule. So once it's created, how long do we keep it? Do we keep it for 6 years and then destroy it, or do we keep it for 5 years and then ascend it to another location? And then we have we also have a place down here for the disposition authority number. So that's the main difference. That records are going to have all of that information, whereas basic folders will probably just have maybe a metadata template assigned to it, but not all that other stuff. And we've got things like vendors in here as well. One thing I did want to talk about also is that when you're setting all of this up, a key idea to keep in mind is going to be security as well, that you're going to want to make sure that you are keeping your security as tight as possible, but also doing it in such a way that that maintenance becomes very simple. We do another video all about assigning security and best practices, and the main thing that you'll hear me say over and over again is assign security by groups. Don't give individuals security. It's hard to maintain. It's always changing. The idea is to lump people into different Laserfiche groups and assign security that way. So if you have maybe a sales team or a group of account managers, and then maybe also a group of leadership, whether it be managers, directors, VPs, etc., maybe they are the only ones that need to have access to the clients and see the client list. So what we can then do is right-click, go down to Access Rights, and then add a specific group to this to say that only these individuals, only our finance maybe, can see this folder. So that way you can start allowing them to view, add, modify, delete, etc. by group. And what that looks like, and the reason we do things like that, is simply to make sure that, first of all, we want it to ensure that everything is easy to find. Organization is key. We don't want anything getting lost. We also want to make sure that if there's sensitive information, we're not sharing it across to people who shouldn't have access to it. So imagine if you only had access to 3 of these folders. That's going to make it a lot easier to navigate and find what's relevant to you and your team. The way that would look, we'll go ahead and do a quick example. So I have a project folder here. It's Stephen, myself, and then Mo, Larry, and Curly. Now, I'm breaking my own rule here because for the demo purposes, I'm giving only Stephen access to this folder and no one else, because that's going to be Stephen's project folder. I wouldn't normally recommend doing that. But if we go ahead and sign out and sign back in as Stephen, we'll see that the number of root folders has already shrunk a little bit. Stephen doesn't necessarily need access to, I think we took out the records folders, so we only want records managers to see those records folders. Stephen is not a records manager. However, Stephen does need access to projects, but only his own. So now we can see that when Stephen goes to the projects folder, he's only seeing his own project folder. He's not seeing any of the Larry, Mo, or Curly's. So that's one thing that I would absolutely consider when you are putting together your folder structure. Maybe begin with the groups. If you have a group for marketing and you have a group for records and you have a group for sales or client management, set those up as your root folders, and then break it up by document type underneath that. And if you want to go a third layer down, you could do that with the year folders. So things are being filed into whatever year they were made or whatever year they're relevant to. I wouldn't go any deeper than about 4 or 5 levels, though. Once you start getting in here and you're opening up multiple different folder structures and this starts to go 4, 5, 6 deep, it's becoming more difficult to navigate to the documents you want, and that's taking away from the whole purpose of using Laserfiche in the first place, which is secure, easy to access, easy to find, easy to change. That we want to make things easier, not more difficult. So I'm going to sign out of this repository and sign into the financial. And this is just another very basic example of folder structures. As you can see with this one, we have things like clients, we've got the HR, we have loans that need approval, awaiting processing, processed, finalized, and denied. So this is an example of where we've taken an internal business process that's used over and over again, and we're using our folder structure to actually facilitate that process. Another thing we've done with this in the past is we can use, we'll see if I still have it. I don't know if I do. But what we've done in the past is we've had metadata dropdowns that will say what stage this is in. And so once it moves to the next stage, workflow can pick it up and automatically move it. We can also set up workflow to send out notifications. So if something is waiting to be finalized, we can send a notification out automatically, an email to give somebody an action item and say, this has been assigned to you. Please approve it, please finalize it, process it, whatever is next in the stage. So it's a good way of using the folder structure to keep documents segregated based on what stage they're in. Once they've been finalized, then we can obviously keep a copy of them in the finalized folder, but it would be more likely that they would then be moved to their final location, whether that be in a client folder, a advisor folder, vendor folder, what have you, depending on the document type. So that's another example that could make sense for you. Here we have an example of some vendors. Looks like we're not going too deep. We're doing things like keeping a copy of the invoices in each of the vendors. Yeah, probably same thing with clients. Pretty empty right now. But another thing that you can do is if you want to have all of your clients in one location so the administrators can see a list of all client folders, but maybe you only want to give access to specific clients to specific account managers. One way to do that would be to use the security and make sure that that individual or those groups only have access to those. More commonly, though, what we see is if you have an account manager type of folder, you can always make a copy of this and then maybe go to so it doesn't really matter. Maybe we went to human resources. Maybe we went to Jim's folder. We can always paste a shortcut. So if we paste a shortcut, when Jerry goes to view that, when he goes in to view that folder, he's just going to be taken directly to the other folder, and he's going to have access to that. So that way you're retaining everything in the other location within the clients, but it's easy for Jim to go into his own folder and see his own clients. So that way you don't have to go in and maintain 2 different folders. You'll be able to see everything in real time. If you create one in one of them, you'll see it in the other one as well. The metadata will be the same also. So that's a good little trick to use as well. The last one I want to take a look at is going to be our government. You'll notice that this is pretty similar to what we saw before. We've got government at the root. We've got our incoming scans at the top. That you can ignore, but then we have the city clerk with all the different advisory boards, agendas, agreements, city council, elections, etc. Within some of these, you'll see we have the subfolders with the years. City council, we've got our closed agenda packets, minutes, open agenda packets, ordinances, publications, resolutions, things like that. What you'll also see is that we have the records management here. And a fun fact about this is actually the Washington State Records Management folder structure. So Washington State's unique in the sense that they have a very strict compliance and regulations on how records for public sector are retained and maintained. And so this is what that actually looks like. And all of these are all ready to go. They already have the properties on them they need. Actually, let's go back. So the disposition authority numbers are already here. The destruction, the cutoff instructions, all of that is already preset. So if you are a municipality or a county in the state of Washington and you'd like to, if you'd like some help, maybe moving this into practice and moving this into production, we have this already set up and ready to deploy. It's as easy as pulling out a briefcase, downloading it, and importing it. It's about a 5-minute job. But also, if nothing else, this is a really good way to look at kind of what best practice would look like when retaining different types of documents and files. You'll notice it's pretty comprehensive. But the value of this is, of course, consistency, knowing that all document types are going to be going to the same folder location every single time. There's no question that if it's gonna end up someplace else. Another thing that you can look into also is, you heard me mention that we really only want to see records managers have access to the records. We want to make sure there's just only 1 or 2 people who are working with the final documents. But one thing we can do is utilize that shortcut capability that I showed you just a second ago. So that way, if you had maybe a public folder, you could have a very similar structure to the records folders here, but then have the shortcuts in the public location. So either the actual general public can access and view these using the Laserfiche portal, like from your website, so that way you have all the documents open to the public from your website. The other option, and what we see more commonly, is having a shortcut to some of the documents that individuals internally can access. That way, without going into the actual records folders, they can still view and interact with documents at this level. Maybe not interact, maybe not make changes or anything, but at least they'll be able to view them. So folder structures, just kind of in summation, it really comes down to what makes the most sense for your organization. The main tenets that we're going to be pressing are that things are secure, that only individuals who should have access to them will have access to them. And we also really want to push organization. We want to make sure that they're in an area where it's intuitive, that they can navigate to it every time. We really want to see it sorted by document type, typically best practice in general. I'd say if there's one takeaway here, really work with that department, root folder, document type, subfolders, and then maybe year subfolder after that. But also make sure that you have security groups and you're setting security by group, not by individual. And those security groups align with the folder structure that you're setting up. All right, and apparently we're starting over. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Also, if you saw something today that you like, but you'd like maybe a little bit of help from CDI and actually move it into practice, or if you just want to discuss this in more depth, you can reach out to us at consulting@citiesdigital.com or at sales@citiesdigital.com. We are very responsive. We have a pretty large team that's always eager to help you with your Laserfiche needs. We'd be more than happy to work with you. With that, that's all I had. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have at this time. All right. Does volume and retention play into the structure or not so much? No. Volume is something that's there's two different types of volumes. There's the physical and then there's the other one. Sorry, I'm blanking right now. But essentially just logical. Physical and logical. So the physical volume is the actual like physical location where the files are being stored. That is kind of a set and forget type of structure that once you've exceeded the space, it'll just roll over into another one. And so volumes, you can have 10 different volumes all within the same folder structure. It won't actually change or affect the way that you're viewing anything. It just changes on the back end where it's going to be navigating to actually open up and find that folder. So don't worry about volumes when you're working on saving things. Retention, on the other hand, if you're using records management, the retention will be set at the record level, and most of that will be captured automatically. If you're looking to, I guess, enact some of those same capabilities by using metadata, then there might be a little bit of extra work and extra effort in order to make sure that that's being met. But really, what it comes down to is if you have a specific folder where they all have the exact same retention schedules, we can show you how to design some searches that will pull back just the documents that have met that criteria or exceeded that retention date. Like basically, if they're ready to be destroyed, if they've met the retention qualifications and they can be deleted or whatever, we can set up some searches to help facilitate that. If you have security limits in a child folder, does the group or individual need to have rights to the parent folder in order to see that? Yes. Yes, they do. There is something called tunneling that will need to be done. There is a video out there. I think it feels like it was only last month, but it was probably like 3 months ago, where I went through best practices on setting up security. So that's available on the CDI YouTube channel. But in a nutshell, what you'll need to do is at the parent folder, grab the group and give them access to read this folder only. So that'll give them access so they can actually see that root folder. And then you'll go into the child folder and then you'll give it access to read, write, change, move, etc. This folder, child folders, documents, etc. But yeah, if you want them to just be able to see one child folder, you will need to give them access to see the parent folder. And then it looks like all of you told me that you can hear me, and I appreciate that because I really wasn't sure. And again, I apologize for internet decided to go out right at 1 o'clock, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. That's pretty par for the course here. But I'm glad we were able to get things going. Any other questions that I can answer for you? It's kind of a tricky topic because it's really kind of unique. There's a couple of best practices, but it kind of changes from individual to individual. So I'm hoping that the examples I gave kind of give you an idea, and I hope that some of the topics I brought up you found helpful. But with that, thank you everybody so much for taking the time to join me today. Hopefully I will see you all at next month. Remember, this was recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. By next week for sure. Our content manager might be on vacation right now, so it may not be immediate, but I will see what I can do to get that up and ready to go as soon as possible. Thanks, everybody.